Caution, Detectives at Work by Harry Char. The Case of the Missing Chihuahua. The doorbell chimed musically. The family was seated at the dining table. Everybody turned to look in the direction of the door. They could see the shadow of a figure trying to peer through the blinds from the outside, the entryway. It was easy to guess who was at the door. Even before the doorbell rang, Clarence always looked through the windows to see what might be happening inside the house. Before anyone could say anything, Cody quickly got to his feet and headed for the door, with a muffled, "I'll get it," as he left the table. As soon as Cody opened the door, Clarence reached in and grabbed his shirt. Cody, you gotta help me. There's been a kidnapping. My dog's been pet-napped. I mean, my pet's been dog-napped." "Hey, calm down, Clarence. Start slow. Tell me what happened." The boy stammered and stuttered. Somebody took our chihuahua, Poncho. We just came home from the movies and we found him gone. We left him in the backyard and there's no way he could have gotten out by himself. He's been kidnapped." "Maybe he went out for a Taco Bell." "Please, Cody, that's not funny at a time like this. I need to get my missing dog back." Clarence began wringing his hands and shuffling his feet. He was obviously distraught. "I'm sorry, Clarence. What I mean is that maybe he wandered off. He's such a small animal, and it would be easy for him to find a hole in your fence to squeeze through." "No way, Jose," Clarence interrupted. "I checked. There's no space through our wall. A cockroach couldn't sneak through. Besides, the dog nappers left a note." "A ransom note? Well, why didn't you say so in the first place? How much do they want for Poncho's return?" "I can't tell. It's in some kind of code. I showed it to my father, and he can't make heads or tails out of it. He's the one who suggested I come ask you. He thinks you're the smartest person in the whole neighborhood." "Maybe in the whole town of Kailua," Cody volunteered. He was proud his detecting skills were being recognized, and he wanted to instill the utmost confidence for Clarence. "You've come to the right man. Tell your father I admire his wisdom." "Come into my office and bring the note with you," Cody said as he motioned the boy inside the house. He led him upstairs to his bedroom. "Pick a spot on the bed and sit, and let me have the note." "This is your office? Looks like a bedroom," Clarence exclaimed as he handed over a folded piece of paper. Clarence's mother with Poncho. "It's an office disguised to look like a bedroom. I'm also in the undercover business, you know." Clarence had no idea what Cody was referring to, but he did not want to appear unknowing, so he replied with wonder in his voice. "Gee." "Before we get down to cases, let's talk fees and retainers. I'm a professional, so you can expect to be charged for my services." "Huh? I'm not sure what you mean." Clarence was puzzled. As simply as Cody could explain, he asked, "Well, how much you got on you, Clarence?" Clarence dug into all four of his pockets. "I got a dime and 3 pennies and a J-Bell trading card, a yo-yo without a string, an autograph from Jason Hotstetler on a paper napkin." "Wait, who's he?" Cody asked, searching his mind for a memory of some forgotten celebrity. "He's the fastest school lunch eater in the whole 6th grade. He can gulp down a complete lunch in less than 3 minutes. "What else you got, Clarence?" The boy groped deeper. He pulled out the stub of a pencil, a toy racing car with one wheel missing, and something which looked like a broken tooth. "How much you got on you, Clarence?" "Let me have the 13 cents in the J-Bell card. We'll call that a retainer." Clarence looked disappointed. "But I ain't got a retainer, Cody. All I have is what I've shown you." "Never mind now. I'll let you know how much more I'll charge when I solve the case. Fair enough?" Clarence was not the best mathematician in school, but he knew he could depend on Cody, and after all, his father was recommending him. He hesitated, but he agreed. "Whatever you say, Cody." The boy detective reached under his bed and drew out a shoebox. On the cover there was a label. "Private Detective Kit. Private. Keep out. This means you, Kavika." From inside the box, he pulled out a magnifying glass, an ink pad which he used for taking fingerprints, a measuring tape, a black felt pen, a red felt pen, a little notepad like the one Lieutenant Columbo carried, and a special pen which was able to write underwater in case he needed to take notes when he was swimming. The boy detective spread the ransom note out on his desk. No wonder Clarence or his father couldn't read it. Instead of writing, there was a scribbling of symbols. Hieroglyphics? Cuneiform? Aztec secret language? Cody had read about the ancient languages of history. He pondered over the note for a long time. "I'll need some time to work this out," he explained to Clarence. "Why don't you go home and come back tomorrow at 10 in the morning? Bring your father. By then I should have the solution for you." Cody wrestled with the puzzle much of the night. He turned the paper on all sides, used a mirror to analyze its reflection, applied heat on the paper to bring out possible invisible writing, and consulted with his code books. All without success. Then he prayed to God to reveal the secret of the message to him. By the time the 10 o'clock news came on, he was able to piece the puzzle together. He went to bed feeling satisfied and at peace. When Clarence returned the next morning with his parents and sister, Cody had the whole kidnapping figured out. He ushered them into the living room and called for his own parents, his brother, and baby sister to join them. He had watched a Hercule Poirot movie, and when everyone was assembled and seated, he stood in front of them. He had set up his mother's chalkboard and easel on which he had drawn some strange markings. He made his presentation in a logical manner, occasionally slipping into a Hercule Poirot accent in order to sound more professional. The paper, he explained, was not a ransom note at all. It was a code used by the dog nappers to communicate with each other. They thought nobody could decode the message, so they were careless and dropped it at the scene of the crime. They had no idea that a brilliant 11-year-old boy detective and codebreaker lived just across the street. Cody pointed to the illustration on the board and led his audience step by step to decipher the secret symbols. Cody explains the code. Take Mutt to Shady Pet Shop. The neighbors were amazed at the young detective's masterful presentation. They notified the police, and they all went to the Shady Pet Shop. There they found Poncho in a display cage, already advertised for sale for only $950. Used dog for sale, cheap, the sign read. The shopkeeper was in the business of receiving and reselling stolen pets. He was arrested, along with his 2 kennel workers who served as his pet nappers. Cody received the grateful appreciation of the police and the neighbors. The news of his animal retrieving talent spread throughout Kailua town. Very shortly afterwards, he was turning down calls for him to help pet owners search for their missing pets. The Boy with the Brown Belt, Carson. The Boy with the Brown Belt. Carson was just 9 years old. He was taller than most boys his age, and he was growing into a handsome young man. His favorite activity was karate. He started learning the sport when he lived in Hawaii and continued practicing when he moved to Arizona. Because he practiced regularly and seriously, he was able to earn his brown belt when he was only 8 years old. Although he was skilled in karate, he was taught never to use it unwisely. Every once in a while, his grandmother, who lived in Hawaii, would send over packages of items hard to get in Arizona. Included in the boxes were food items that Carson and his family enjoyed. Lihing Mui apple and lychee jelly. These made Carson's mouth water. One day, when he was home alone, he decided to sample a lychee jelly. It was delicious. One wasn't enough, so he put 2 more in his pocket and thought he might take them along while he went rollerblading up the block. Carson had taught himself to rollerblade. He could skate like an expert, riding in circles, going backwards, jumping and landing, and doing several tricks on skates. He was in his garage, looking for his rollerblades, when he happened to look across the street. He could see that his neighbor's garage door was open. That's funny, he thought. I know the Whitehalls are driving to Tucson today. They must have forgotten to lock their garage. He continued to look for his rollerblades. They were buried under a mountain of other equipment: hockey sticks, knee pads, headgear, gloves, bats, baseballs, soccer balls, and basketballs. The skates were on the bottom of the pile. As he was pulling them out from the heap, he noticed 2 boys in the Whitehall's garage across the way, filling a box with items from the garage. They were putting in shoes, swim fins, balls, fishnets, jackets, among other things. Carson knew immediately they were strangers up to no good. The Whitehalls had a daughter his age and a little baby brother, but these 2 guys were junior high age. He wished his parents were home so he could tell them there were burglars across the street. His father was at work, and his mother had taken his baby sister and younger brother to go shopping downtown. His older brother, Cody, was visiting a friend 2 blocks away. What to do? He couldn't just let them get away. He walked across the street and yelled out to them, "Hey, you guys, I don't think that's nice, taking people's things when they're not home. That's stealing." "Hey, that's stealing." One of the boys looked up from what he was doing and asked his friend, "What was that?" It's just some little kid. Must be from around here someplace." And turning to Carson, he screwed up his face and said in a forceful voice, "Get lost, kid." Now Carson was sure they were crooks. He stood his ground and looked at them steadily. He wanted to make sure that when they left, he would remember what they looked like and what they were wearing. In his mind, he began measuring their size. One guy is blonde. He's about 3 inches taller than me, and he's wearing a checked shirt with long tan pants. The other guy is about the same height, a little thinner, dark hair, with all kinds of pimples on his face. He has a green tank top with a Diamondback label. He's wearing black pants. He looks something like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, only uglier. Carson was sure he would remember their descriptions. "Didn't you hear what I said?" the guy with the tank top yelled, curling his mouth to look tough. "Scram, kid!" Carson was nervous. He wished the boys would drop the box and just go away. "You shouldn't be doing that. You better put everything back in the garage." Uglyface stopped what he was doing. He walked toward Carson, making his face as mean as possible. He growled in a rough voice, "And who's gonna stop us? You? You're just a kid. Get out of the way." Carson would not budge. He prayed, "Lord, help me to remember everything I learned in karate if I have to defend myself against these 2 bullies." He stood firmly on the sidewalk. Uglyface jabbed his hand toward to shove him out of the way. Carson expertly sidestepped the jab, moved swiftly behind the boy, grabbed the guy's wrist, and twisted up into an arm lock. "Hey, you punk kid! That hurts! Let go of me!" Carson twisted tighter. The boy winced in pain. "I'll let go if you promise to stop this stealing. If you don't, I'm going to really hurt you." All right, I promise." Carson released his hold and pointed to a tree out in the front yard. "Go stand by the tree and don't try to make any trouble." The boy walked meekly over and stood by the tree, rubbing his sore wrist. He was not going to face the little kid again. "That hurts. Let go." The blond boy had watched Carson control his friend, and he would not believe that a younger, smaller boy was interfering with their burglary. "I don't believe this, Alec. You're letting a little kid push you around. Watch me flatten him out with one punch." He stepped over to Carson and wound up his arm like he was going to throw a fast, hard punch. He swung. Carson deftly moved to his right and parried the blow. He aimed and hit the bigger boy right in the solar plexus with his extended palm. The boy doubled over, and Carson moved in with an open-handed jab just under his jaw. The older boy was hurt and stunned. He had not expected such a fierce defense from a little kid. "Enough, he yelled. And then to his friend by the tree, "Let's get out of here. This kid is a menace." They ran up the sidewalk and around the corner, leaving the box of stolen goods in the garage. They had parked their bicycles in the vacant lot, and they leaped on the bikes, and Carson could see them speeding out of the subdivision. When Mother came home, Carson told her about the two boys trying to steal from their neighbor. He described the thieves to his mother. He did not mention his brave actions in preventing the burglary. She called the police and reported to them all Carson had told her. Later that afternoon, the police picked up the two boys. They had gone to a neighborhood 3 miles away and were caught trying to steal from another house. When Father came home, they told him about the excitement across the street earlier that day. Father was curious. "And what did you do when the boys were in the garage?" he asked. "Oh, not much. Just what I had to do," Carson responded with a satisfied grin. Louis meets the Bolivian brothers. Louis is now 8 years old. He's in the 2nd grade at Capunahala Elementary School. He's a good student, and he enjoys playing Nintendo and watching cartoons on the TV in his room. One Saturday morning, he was alone at home. His father was over at church working with some men, and his mother had gone shopping. She told Louis she would be back in a couple of hours. To keep himself entertained, Louis turned on his television to a Fred Flintstone movie. Fred's relatives had come over for a visit and stayed and stayed and stayed. It was such fun watching Fred Flintstone trying to get rid of his unwelcome house guests. When the program was over, Louis decided he would go out into the yard and play. He picked up a wide sheet of cardboard and went to the upper part of the hill in the back. He lay the cardboard at the top of the slope and sat on it and slid down. He enjoyed riding downhill. Sometimes he tumbled off the cardboard, but he always picked himself up and started again. As he was playing, he heard a voice. It sounded like somebody trying to get his attention. He looked around, and he saw 3 young men on top of his neighbor's driveway. They looked like they had been out in the sun a lot. They were quite tan. One of them waved to Louis and called out, "Chico, ven aquí por favor." "Come here, please." It was a strange language, and Louis did not understand him. The young man extended his arm forward with his palm down. Then he moved his fingers back and forth like he was waving goodbye. Louis waved back, "Okay, goodbye." The three men kept standing at the top. The oldest continued to repeat his movement, arm extended, palm down, fingers moving. Chico, por favor, ¿dónde para el bus? Where is the bus stop? Maybe they don't understand what I'm saying, Louis thought. This time he waved again and said, Sayonara, nice meeting you. The three men stood around, looking puzzled and lost. Louis wished he could be more helpful, but he remembered what his parents had told him about talking to strangers. I better start remembering all I can about them, just in case they make trouble in the neighborhood. He looked at them carefully. They were young, between 18 and 21 years old. They all had dark curly hair and hair on the arms. They looked like brothers. They all wore dress shirts tucked into their long pants. They wore shoes. Their appearance seemed odd to Louis. Most young men their age wore T-shirts or aloha shirts hanging over their shorts. And shoes. Hardly anybody wore shoes on a Saturday. These people were overdressed. Louis felt he could give an accurate description of them if he had to. The three young men talked among themselves. Louis could hear words, but was not able to make out what they were saying. He looked around. The neighbor to his right was in his yard raking leaves. One guy in the rented house across the street was sitting in his open garage, reading a magazine. There were enough people around to watch if anything went wrong, Louis thought. He decided it was all right to approach the three strangers. He walked up the driveway to the three. He motioned to them. Follow me. I'll take you to Mr. Matsuda. He can talk your language. Mr. Matsuda lived in the house to the left. He spoke English well, but with an accent. Maybe they're all from the same country. Mr. Matsuda would be happy to see someone from his homeland. The neighbor was in his yard, peeking into little green cans, checking for termites. Louis went up to him and asked if he would speak to the men. Mr. Matsuda looked up and saw the three standing on his driveway. He called Louis closer. They're JFs, he whispered. What's a JF? Louis asked. They're Jacob followers. They go around to houses when people are busy working and bother them. They like to get people upset. Louis didn't think Mr. Matsuda was right, so he asked, How can you tell? All you got to do is look at their clothes. People who dress nicely and go from house to house are JFs. I usually send them away. Louis walked back to the three men and tried to explain to them that Mr. Matsuda wasn't able to help. When his mother returned home, she would know what to do. He pointed to the curb under a tree with yellow flowers and made gestures for them to sit and wait. The three men did not understand Louis either, but they guessed he was telling them to wait under the tree. They walked over and sat together. They realized they needed to learn English fast, or they would remain lost. The three men were members of a crew from a ship from Bolivia. They were brothers. The oldest was named Alejandro. The middle one was called Basilio. They're JFs. And the youngest was Carlito. The ship had stopped overnight in Honolulu Harbor, and when the men saw how beautiful Hawaii was, they wanted to stay forever. Early in the morning, when it was still dark, they'd put on their best clothes, sneaked off the boat, and walked out to Nimitz Highway. They held up some US dollar bills in their hands to the cars which drove by. One driver stopped, snatched the money from their hands, and gave them a ride in his car. He drove them up Nuuanu Avenue, over the Pali, and on to Kahehili Highway. It was a little compact car, and the brothers were jammed together. Carlito developed a cramp in his leg, so he tapped the driver on the shoulder to stop the car. The driver made a right turn across from the Kaneohe Recreation Center and stopped. All the brothers got out to stretch and walked around. Before they could get back into the car, the driver sped away. The brothers were now stranded and in a strange place. They had some American money in their pockets, and they hoped they could find a bus to take them to town. There they might find a place to have breakfast, and then visit the stores, and then find some place to hide from the authorities. It was early Saturday morning, and the traffic was not too heavy. They crossed the highway at the traffic lights and headed up toward the community college. They wandered around the area without finding a bus stop. That's how they ended up near Lewis's house on a Saturday. The three sat together and talked in their own language, which was Spanish. They realized that it was too hard to learn English in a short time. Alejandro suggested that when they heard anyone speaking English, each brother would pick out and remember a phrase or sentence. They were to keep repeating what they heard until they could say it smoothly. While they were making their plan, Leslie came running up the sidewalk. "Hey, Lewis, did you watch Fred Flintstone this morning?" "Yes, I did. It was so funny." Alejandro pointed to himself, meaning he would be the one to remember this sentence. "Yes, I did. It was so funny. I did. It was so funny." Leslie continued. "I had to answer the phone before the program ended. Did Fred Flintstone ever chase all the relatives from his house?" "He sure did. You better believe it. He did." Alejandro pointed to Basilio. It was the middle brother's turn to memorize the sentence. He had listened carefully. He repeated, "He sure did. You better believe it. He did. He sure did. You better believe it." As the boys talked, Lewis turned to Leslie. "How about coming over to my house? I can fix you a glass of juice. Would you like that?" "That's great. Thank you. I'm so thirsty. I could drink the Pacific Ocean." The youngest brother, Carlito, did not catch the entire conversation, but he heard Leslie answer, "I'm so thirsty. I could drink the Pacific Ocean. I'm so thirsty." Just as they were entering the door to Lewis's house, Leslie said, "When your mother comes home, ask her if you can come over to my house. We can play with my electric train set." "All right. What time should I come over?" "I could drink the Pacific Ocean." "The sooner the better, Lewis." They closed the door and went into the house. Lewis fixed 2 glasses of juice, and the 2 friends sat at the table and drank and talked. They were in the house a while. Meanwhile, the 3 brothers got tired of waiting. They were getting hungry. They decided to walk down the hill. Perhaps they could find a shopping center with a fast food place and eat some breakfast. They walked out of the Castle Hills subdivision, heading for the recreation center. Along the way, they came upon a fire hydrant, which was gushing up water 20 feet into the air. They stopped and watched. Some car had driven into the hydrant at high speed and knocked it over. Water spurted out and the driver raced off, leaving the scene. The water was spilling over the sidewalk and flooding the road. Some other motorist driving past had called the police on his car phone. While the 3 brothers were standing around looking at the fountain, a police car drove up. The officer got out and approached the brothers. "What happened?" he asked. "Who did this?" "Yes, I did. It was so funny," volunteered Alejandro. "Are you telling me you wrecked this hydrant all by yourself?" Basilio was proud to show what he learned. "Yes, he did. You better believe it. He sure did. You better believe it." The officer was stunned. "Why would you want to damage this hydrant? It's a mess." Now Carlito had his chance. "I'm so thirsty. I could drink the Pacific Ocean. I'm so thirsty." "You're thirsty, so you wrecked a fire hydrant just to get a drink of water? I've got a mind to haul you off in my patrol car and throw you in jail." All 3 responded together. "The sooner the better. The sooner the better." At the jail, the police found an officer who could speak Spanish. They learned the brothers were sailors from a ship docked in Honolulu. They drove them back to the vessel in the police car and turned them over to the ship's captain. When he heard about what the three brothers had tried to do, he put them to work immediately in the ship's galley, scrubbing a mountain of pots and pans. The water was gushing up 20 feet. When Mom returned home, Louis told her about meeting 3 men who could not speak English. "And what happened to them?" his mother asked. "Oh, they're probably downtown now, having a good time." "The sooner the better." The Lau Lau Man. Note, lau lau is a Hawaiian delicacy made with pork, fish, and greens wrapped in tea leaves. The Lau Lau Man. At 6 o'clock one summer evening, when the weather was clear and pleasant in Monowili Valley, and Mom was almost through getting dinner prepared, the doorbell rang. Mother, Chase, and Sister Cassidy were home. Dad would be home from work soon, and the family would have dinner together. Chase was entertaining his sister. He was 12, she was 9. Although she had watched Chase perform many times, she still enjoyed serving as audience while her brother practiced his magic tricks. Chase had received a magician's kit 3 years ago and made an effort regularly to master certain routines. When he put on a show, he wore his special magic coat. Not that it contained secret pockets or hidden objects, but it made him look like a professional magician. He had learned to pass large metal rings through one another, and he could make certain objects appear or disappear. He liked the trick of passing a quarter through a solid wooden table the best, but he needed more practice with that routine. Because he possessed an unusual memory with dates, numbers, and facts, he especially did well with card tricks. When he gave out a dozen cards to a person, he seemed able to recall every single card he distributed. "Pick a card, any card," he was telling his sister. Someone was at the door. Mom stopped her cooking and opened the front door. A man stood on the stoop with a box of plastic bags filled down at his side. He introduced himself. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Jerry Antone, and I'm on a fundraising mission for my daughter's softball team, the Kamuki Dragons. The team is doing well, and they have a chance to play in the Nationals in California next month. Would you help by buying some freshly made lau lau for $10 a bag?" With Chase standing quietly at her side, Mom kindly said no. She was busy preparing dinner, but she wanted to contribute a small amount. She gave the man a dollar bill. Chase watched as the conversation took place. The exchange only took 5 minutes, but Chase observed and remembered many things about the caller. He was around 35, 40 years old, about 2 inches shorter than his older brother Cody. That would make the man about 5 feet 5 or 6 inches tall, about Cody's size and build 2 years ago, maybe 150 pounds. Tattoos on both arms from the wrist up onto the shirt sleeves, blue curvy lines with red patterns. It was difficult to make out the design. Long brown curly hair, balding on the top. Unshaven for several days, medium complexion, blue eyes, sharp nose. Local Haole looking. Maroon t-shirt with pocket, holding a pocket calendar with holograph design of the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. Dark blue trousers, brown leather work boots. After the man left, Chase returned to his magic show. The telephone rang. Mrs. Davis across the street was calling. She wanted to verify a visit from a Johnny Apu who was selling lau lau on behalf of his daughter's softball team. Mrs. Davis herself makes her own delicious lau lau, and she declined to buy any from the caller. He had mentioned how the lady across the street chose not to buy anything, but gave a generous donation, and Miss Davis felt moved to give a $5 donation. Mom confirmed the visit and hung up. Chase volunteered, "But Mom, the guy told you his name was Jerry Antone." "He said his name was Jerry Antone." This reminder stirred Mom's suspicion. It may be a ruse to case people's houses for break-ins later, she fretted. She became concerned enough that she decided to notify the police. She told the dispatcher about a stranger calling on homes in the neighborhood and giving himself different names. The dispatcher was unconcerned. "No crime in that," and hung up. Mom returned to finishing preparing dinner. Chase went out to the driveway. He saw the man rushing from the Nakamura's house, spilling a couple of bags from the box he was carrying. He hurried to a blue truck parked alongside the Motto's house. Chase is normally not given to initiate conversations, especially to strangers, but he could not contain himself this time. "Hey, mister, I thought you said your name was Jerry Antone." "I thought you said you were Jerry Antone." "Scram, kid. Mind your own business." The man responded and dumped the box onto the bed of the truck. He got in and sped off. Chase walked over to the packages dropped on the street. He took them back to his house and unraveled the tea leaves. Bundled up inside was just old newspapers, trash from a wastebasket, used tissues, pieces of plastic, appeals from different charity organizations, a couple addressed to Lloyd Amon, 246 Cowconney Street in Honolulu. "Well, this looks very interesting," thought Chase. Within 10 minutes, the telephone rang. It was the police dispatcher. "Where is he? Is his car still there? Which way did he go? I'm sending over a couple of policemen to talk to you." The man had gone to the Nakamura's house, introduced himself as Frank Wilson. He spoke of the kindness of the two other neighbor ladies and persuaded Mrs. Nakamura to buy 2 packages of Lau Lau. Moreover, Mrs. Nakamura was so touched by the man's appeal that she donated an extra $5 to the daughter's team. She opened one package immediately, expecting to surprise her family with fresh, delicious Lau Lau, when she let out a piercing scream. What she discovered when she unwrapped the tea leaves was a wad of balled-up newspapers and trash. She'd been scammed. The crook was already driving off. She called the police. 2 policemen responded. It was growing dark. They interviewed Mrs. Nakamura first. She could only provide a name. "Frank somebody." One policeman went to talk to Mrs. Davis. The other came over to question Mom. "I was kind of busy getting dinner ready, but if you'll ask my son, he can give you all the information you want and need." "Oh, sure," thought the cop. Talk to a 12-year-old kid? What could he tell me that we couldn't get from 3 adults? Okay, all I got to lose is time. Chase provided the necessary information. Description of the suspect, his hair coloring, facial features, tattoos, clothing, and the make of car, among other facts. Don't suppose you'd know the license number, eh? It was too dark, I guess. You've been a great kid. What fantastic observation and memory. But a license number, in the dark, that's expecting too much, even for a sharp kid like you. Well, sir, it was a blue Toyota Tacoma, short bed, license HYC 2226. Go check a person named Lloyd Amon on Cowconney Street in Honolulu. He's most likely the culprit. It was a blue Toyota Tacoma truck. The policeman marveled at young Chase's memory, his keen, accurate observations, and his amazing powers of retention and recollection. He had identified the suspect, his vehicle, and had actually solved the case for the police. Amon was located and arrested. He was a former soldier who served in Europe. While there, he became addicted to drugs and alcohol and was dishonorably discharged from the service. He was 36 years old and had never been married, nor did he have any children. He fed his drug habit by fleecing ordinary people in all parts of the island. He had never been caught because he usually wore a jacket to cover his tattoos and a hat to hide his hair. His contacts with his victims were always brief, and he was able to flee the scene without being identified. When he was asked by the arresting officers why he took advantage of innocent people, he replied, "It's better than holding them up with a gun." Dad came home after the excitement was over. At the dinner table, when he was asked by his father about his day, Chase started with a riddle. "Dad, do you know how one man can be four guys at the same time?" The Cat Burglar. Neighborhood alert. Cat burglar in vicinity. 2 homes already robbed. Maunawili Valley is a peaceful, quiet community. Neighbors are friendly and meet together regularly in community-sponsored activities. Announcements of community events are posted on a bulletin board located at the entrance of the subdivision. Residents also use the board to convey birthday wishes, congratulations of happy times, and post other notices. One day, an alert was written with chalk, informing the residents to be aware of a cat burglar in the area. Already 2 homes had valuables taken. When 9-year-old Cassidy read the notice, she was relieved her family didn't own a cat. She hoped the burglars would not mistake their pet rabbit for a cat. Cassidy and her pet rabbit, Floppy. Cassidy's older brothers were both on the mainland attending college. Cody, the oldest, now lives in Houston, Texas, with their father's parents and attends school there. Carson, the second boy, goes to Westmont College in California. Her brother's rooms in their house in Maunawili Valley are unoccupied until they return home for vacations. The rooms are fascinating spaces for exploring for an inquisitive 9-year-old girl. Cassidy enters and visits them regularly. Both rooms are much as the boys left them: unwashed shirts and trousers dropped on the floor, books scattered on the bed, the desk, and the floor, closet doors partly open with some clothes on hangers, others draped carelessly over cardboard cartons. It seems like both boys had to rush off in a hurry. She remembered Cody's parting words to his family. "Just leave everything the way I like them. I don't want to come home and have to look for things." Cody has an interesting collection of items spread in assorted places in his room. On the desk, there are several trophies and awards from his participation in youth functions when he was younger: soccer, baseball, basketball, and youth club mementos. He is an avid reader, and there are several Harry Potter books and paperbacks covering mostly sports statistics and political and government studies. Among other things, there's an alarm clock, belt buckles, CDs, DVDs, VHS tapes, along with a baseball, a glove, box games, a compass, and a pair of binoculars. During one visit, Cassidy picked up the binoculars and peered through them. Objects appear smaller. She turned them around and put the other end to her eyes. Things looked bigger, but blurry and out of focus. She played with the adjustment and was able to get the sight clear. She went to the window and looked out. The bedrooms are on the 2nd floor, and she could see people from the neighborhood along the Maleko Street outside the house. A couple of women were walking uphill, going left. A man with 2 dogs on leash walked downhill in the opposite direction. The city bus drove by and stopped at the corner. She trained the binoculars on the bus. She watched Mrs. Oliveira board, walk inside toward the rear. Cassidy could see 2 other passengers already seated. She could almost make out what they looked like. The binoculars were fun. The bus pulled away. Cassidy directed the binoculars along the houses on Aloha Oi Drive. There was Mrs. Ching in a robe over her nightclothes, setting out the rubbish containers for pickup. It was early morning. She looked at the little clock on Cody's desk. 5:45 a.m. It was just beginning to light. Some people are early risers. Some people are not. She laid the binoculars down and moved her vision from the corner up to the houses on the other side of the street. Some people are late getter-uppers. Some people aren't even home, like the Crowleys, who live in the 3rd house from the corner. They were in Kansas visiting their daughter. So how come there appeared to be something moving along the walkway from the back of the house? She quickly picked up the binoculars. She could see a figure carrying a TV set through Crowley's yard. The figure proceeded cautiously, making sure nobody was watching. A cat burglar, except he's stealing TV sets, thought Cassidy. She looked around the room, found a blank paper and a stubby pencil, and wrote as fast as she could to record what she saw. She wished she had practiced writing more, but today it was faster to print. Red truck. On the street, she noticed an old truck with yard working tools, power trimmers, lawn mowers in the bed parked along the curb. The thief approached the truck, deposited the TV onto the bed, opened the door, and got into the driver's side. Cassidy wrote on the pad, "Red truck, Pablo," shortening the crudely painted sign on the door, "Pablo's Yard Service." It was 5:58 a.m., so she added 6 on the paper. Red truck, Pablo 6, black jacket, long hair, green cap. At that moment, another person carrying a computer came to the truck and set it in the bed. "Let's go," he muttered. Cassidy could hear the conversation. Driver: "How come you never get the nice CD player?" Partner: "Was too heavy. I only get 2 hands." Driver: "That was a 5-changer player. Go back and get it. I wait, but hurry up." Cassidy wrote, "Comp, man, small, fat, blue and white T-shirt, Iea plum, tan cap with sea boots, tattoo right arm, snake fire." What she saw was the burglar carrying the computer to the truck. He was a short and heavy, dressed in a blue striped shirt with the inscription "Iea Plumbing" across the front. The man wore a brown cap with a Nike logo. He wore denim shorts and work boots. She also noticed a tattoo of a snake spitting fire along his right forearm. He turned to return to the house. Cassidy wanted to get a closer look, maybe see how many cats were in the truck bed. It was still early in the morning. Mom had driven Dad to the bus stop and was most likely doing her daily morning walk in the park. She would not return home for another hour. Still dressed in her pink pajamas, she hurried down the stairs, opened the front door, and carefully walked over to the truck parked across the street. The driver suddenly looked up and saw Cassidy looking intently. She now noticed the tattoo in the shape of a teardrop beneath his left eye and the initials CG under it. He wore an earring which looked like a small anchor. "What do you want, kid?" He muffled a bark. Cassidy was frightened, and she knew she had to tell him something believable. "God help me," she prayed. I'm looking for my pet rabbit. Have you seen a white rabbit hop into this yard?" "Get lost, kid. Go home. It's too early for you to be out." "Yes, sir," she answered and walked around the back of the truck. As she passed, she saw the license number, GPS 1952, GPS 1952, GPS 1952, GPS 1952. She repeated and proceeded down Maleko Street to make the driver think that was the direction where she lived. "Have you seen my pet rabbit?" The partner returned lugging the CD player, and the driver turned his attention to him. While they were occupied, Cassidy slipped back across the street into Mauto's yard, around the back of their house over to the safety of her own house. GPS 1952, GPS 1952. She repeated as she looked for paper to record the number. She went upstairs to continue her watch. The truck was gone. Cassidy met Mom at the door when she drove home. "My, but you're up early, little girl," Mom declared. "Mom, I saw the cat burglars, but they weren't stealing cats. They were making off with Crowley's TV and stuff. She gave Mom details of all she observed. Mom called the police. 2 officers responded, came over to the house, and were surprised a little girl was so alert and could provide such accurate information. The police were able to track down the thieves. They were Charlie Ghosteel, age 42, ex-convict, and his partner, Wee Willie Wingo. At dinner that evening, when Dad asked Cassidy about her day, she told him, "You know, Dad, you can see a lot of people doing a lot of things from Cody's room." The view from Cody's room.